Welcome to Curito Connects. I'm your host, Jenn, and I've been conversing with friends around the world about life challenges and impactful moments. Conversations on this platform look at answering the questions, how we overcome challenges and how our experiences shape who we are and the work we do today. I hope this work can inspire you on your own personal and individual journey. Let's dive right in. Hello, my guest today is Brenda Lin, a writer, mother, wife, daughter, and brand manager of Les Enfants. I feel like I have to pronounce it with that French accent.
It was perfect.
Thank you. Second generation Taiwanese children branded family business. Hi, Brenda.
Hi, Jen.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Okay, that was a mouthful. I'm so honored to have Brenda here with me today on Curito Connects to share with us her own personal journey about homecoming, the balance between working and motherhood, which is such an important topic, and how her passion and love for writing fits into her work in the family business. So, Brenda, without further ado, I'd love for you to jump right in and see where your storytelling takes us today.
All right, Jen, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I started out thinking what I wanted to talk about today, and homecoming has been on my mind a lot. This is, as you know, I grew up like you in Taiwan, and I left to go to college. And once I left, I was away for 20 years and never intended to come home. It was kind of never in my plans.
Like never, never, even though you grew up here?
Like never, never, because I think a lot of it has to do with the time that I grew up in, right? So I'm a good bit older than you. I'm at least 10, maybe 12 years older. So I grew up in Taiwan in the bulk of, mainly in the 80s and very early 90s. And that was a time when, the U.S. was still kind of, global superpower, and we were all, intoxicated by, anything that's American and Western, right?
Yeah.
And I think that my love for home in Taiwan was very automatic and not thoughtful, right? In that it was true but very general. I couldn't very articulately say very much about Taiwanese history. Culture was always just filtered through my parents. And the trajectory was always westward.
Right. Like your experience of Taiwan was through the lens of your parents almost, right? Like you didn't know where things were, or even like geographically, or like what was Taiwan known for. It was probably, if someone asked you probably would not have been able to answer.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I think I would agree with that comment.
Really? So yes, exactly.
And we also are where our school is, which is in the suburbs of Taipei, and school schedule's so busy, a lot of us didn't even really get to know downtown. I think I only got to know our Taipei after I moved back from college.
Exactly.
Right, to really experience it. So I definitely can relate to that statement. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe to a certain extent that's true of anybody's home, right? Because your experience of it as a child or as an adolescent is so different from your experience of it as an adult, right? Independent of your family. Yeah, so anyway, with that kind of, it was so much so that I grew up without a Taiwanese citizenship, right? And my parents never thought that it was necessary to apply for one. And so I only ever had an American passport, right? So anyway, going to the States for college and then graduate school, and then, then my husband and I moved to Singapore and then Hong Kong. Even when we moved to Asia, Taiwan wasn't an immediate kind of at the top of the list destination. No, it wasn't. It wasn't, which is so interesting. I think, maybe part of it is because also there's this idea of, I guess when you're young too, you just want to explore, right? And you want to define what home is for yourself. First and foremost, right? And we were not finished exploring yet. So the notion of Taiwan came, after we had spent some time in Hong Kong, and it had become pretty clear by then. We had 3 very young children. It had become very clear that it just was not an ideal place to raise 3 young kids. And so I remember we spent a lot of time. We used to live in the mid-levels, and we would take morning walks up this hill. Mm-hmm. And we would just discuss, should we move to Taiwan? If we don't move to Taiwan, where would we go? And we were not ready to move back, to the U.S., which was still kind of at the back of our minds. That's kind of where we would end up eventually, in the kind of,
You still wanted your adventure.
Yeah,
with 3 little kids.
Yeah, and at that, yeah, exactly. So, we were like, are we ready to go home? What does it mean if we move to Taiwan? What are we going to do? That I have a family business here, and when I lived in Hong Kong, I was involved in at a remove. Yeah, but I was starting to become involved, and so I was also writing at the time, and so for me too, it was I had to ask myself, if I move home, I'm gonna kind of get deeper, right? And am I ready?
But you also didn't have to, right?
Yeah, you're right. You always have a choice.
You always have a choice.
That's true. And my parents are, they're quite open and progressive. And when we were growing up, I have an older brother, neither of us ever, at least I don't think that we received explicit pressure to take on the family business, even though I think that we know that kind of in their heart of hearts, it would be quite wonderful if we did.
Right.
Yeah. So you're right, Jen. Like, I don't have to, but I think I would feel bad if I didn't try.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it was like this decision that I had to make. So after many walks, my husband and I decided, you know what, let's just try it like any other place, right?
Right.
Let's do it together. And, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, right? It'll always be home, right? A home that you can, visit.
Because mom and dad are here.
Yes, exactly. They're the anchor. Yeah.
So just kind of rewinding a little bit, your husband is not Asian, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And so what was that like for him, to be a part of this decision making and, his role in it too, kind of going like, okay, well, yeah, Brenda's parents are in Taiwan and, if we do this move, she's going to get, deeper involved with the family business. Where would he position himself in the equation,
right.
And that's a conversation that, many couples have to make, right?
Yeah,
in terms
true.
of the role each person plays and the support to give to one another and etc.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think so. My husband and I met when we were still in college. So, we had been together for many, many years already. And so in the way, like whenever I would come home for summers or holidays, he would come home with me, right? And he, he kind of, I feel like he got to know all my friends from growing up. And so he was this like, we used to joke that he's like a
the honorary
exactly, right?
The honorary member.
Yeah, so for him, there's a lot of familiarity, and he loves Taiwan. But I would say that for him too, it was less pressure, right? Like the kind of adventure, the sense of adventure is still very much there. When we got married, I remember my dad told me, he was like, I think it would be easiest for you after you get married to choose a third neutral place to live, to make your home, because then there's no pressure on either one of you, right, to play host all the time.
Yeah. Wise words from dad.
Right? I know. So I will say that our first year back, it was a lot of pressure on me to figure things out. Not to say, my husband's very
supportive,
super supportive, super hands-on, but
there's always that internal.
Yeah, because it is, it is your home and my anchor is here, my family's here. I can offer so much more support, right? But offering support also means that you do a lot of a lot more of the legwork, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think the first year was it was quite difficult, I have to say. And yeah.
Would you say when you think back on all the different things you've done in your earlier days that this particular move, was one of the more difficult ones that you've had to do? Right. Not just for the move, but just with the 3 kids, and they're still little, so they also need a lot of attention and time. Navigating your parents, having been away for 20 years and figuring that out. And then also your husband, and then your social, I mean, that's a lot of things.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a
It's
lot.
a lot of things.
It's a lot. I think it was difficult. I'm not sure if it was the most difficult. The Hong Kong years were pretty tough, but I will say, I feel like, and I'm sure you would agree, that oftentimes the most difficult things are the most meaningful.
Yes,
and
of course. Yes.
yeah, and so I think, because even though I felt there was a lot I had to do to kind of get my family settled on our own terms,
Right.
at the end of the day, I definitely felt like, I felt very lucky because kind of have it all, right?
Yeah.
I have my own family here, and and my parents are here, and so yeah.
What was the sweet spot of, you just mentioned earlier, settling and starting your own home? Like, can you go into that a little bit? I think our audience might enjoy this one, right? Because those who can relate are kind of like, okay, I'm moving back. Not living with my parents, not making my wife or my husband move in, so how did you negotiate or navigate that, so to speak?
I think that you nailed it in not living with your parents. So when we first moved back, of course, we lived with my parents, right, to get our bearings. It wasn't really our plan that wasn't our long-term plan, but it was our situation for the short term. And my parents and I have a great relationship, and they have a great relationship with my husband as well, and they adore my kids. But still, right, when you wake up every morning in your pajamas, you just want to be in pajamas, like with your kind of nearest and dearest. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to have to,
I know your parents are your nearest and dearest as well.
Yeah.
When you're 5.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so... I mean, we kind of started looking at places really early on, and I think we decided on living close to school,
right,
which is quite a distance from where my parents live. And we were actually about to sign for an apartment, when my mom said, "Oh, actually, there's this house that just came up. Do you want to just go take a look?" So we're like, yeah, sure. So you like me, I'm a city girl. I grew up in apartments my entire life, right? And I love knowing that there's somebody else living next door to me, right?
Like maybe some of them have a doorman.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
An elevator.
Yes, exactly.
You can ding dong your neighbor if you don't have milk in your fridge for your coffee.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. So you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we go look at this house, and we walk in, and immediately my husband's like, "This is it, right? This is the place." And there's a yard, and I've never lived in a house, at least not that I remember. I did when I was really young, living in the States with, before I was 4. So I don't have real memories of that. So that was a real game changer, I think, having that physical space.
Yeah.
My husband grew up, in houses. He grew up in San Diego, like next to the ocean, and with space and with a view, right? Yeah. Whereas I grew up...
You're like, I see the next building.
I see another window, and that gives me comfort,
Yeah.
I mean, like even in grad school in New York City, I remember... Oh, yeah. My building would look into kind of the courtyard with, kind of facing 3 other buildings.
And you can see the neighbor.
Yeah, and I love kind of spying on them and seeing all the little stories that are unfolding in every single apartment. There's something very, I don't know, so human about it. But anyway, so yes. So for me, that was a huge...
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And renovation work? Like...
No. I mean,
we
it's just, it's a rental. But yeah, so I would say that was a game changer for both of us, right? So for my husband, he felt like, okay, we can live here, but not have to feel kind of the... I don't know, the physical limitations of
yeah.
like, urban living, right?
Yeah.
But then this is my favorite. You can walk 5 minutes to the nearest 7-Eleven, right? Which is very important. So best of both worlds.
7-Eleven is very important.
Yeah.
If you're in Taiwan, you can get everything done at 7-Eleven.
Exactly. Yeah. So I feel like you're asking, what was the moment when things kind of opened up? I think that was it, and then it felt like, okay, we're gonna start to define, how we're gonna raise our children in Taiwan. So yeah.
How do you feel that, like, when you look back, because I mean, this is what you say, 13 years ago, right? When you made that decision
to move here. Actually, this is our 9th year here.
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
ninth. I just added extra years for you.
Okay.
but when you guys moved back and when you were navigating all that, what were some of the things that really helped keep you grounded during those times of, like, I mean, we don't have to say difficulties, but like, like challenges. So like working with your parents, working in a Taiwanese company, was there like language barriers, dealing with your staff, mental wise in terms of like communication. I think a lot of these very crucial elements that kind of make it or break it for a lot of people, some who may be listening to this episode, who really relate to, in terms of like, so why am I still here? Or like, like when we talk about choices, it's like, and kind of like you said earlier, you and your husband and your kids came out here kind of to test it out, see if it would work, because maybe it doesn't work, and then you would have packed up your bags again and then moved elsewhere or moved back to the States, because like there's always that option.
Yes. Yeah.
So, how did you guys kind of,
yeah,
or for you personally too, how did you kind of like,
anchored? So for me, so writing is a really big part of my life. And I write every day. It may not always be towards something, but it's a daily practice, right? So I think that when you ask, what my anchor was during that time, or even, right now, it's writing. But I will say that, going back to when I recall the early years, coming home and, because I studied English and writing in school, language is a huge part of who I am, right? And how anyone communicates. When I first came home, my Chinese just had gone
out the window.
Oh my gosh. It was
Goodbye.
like, yes, it was awful. I remember sitting in a meeting once with my brother. I work with my brother, and I was speaking in Chinese, stumbling over my words, not being able to find them. I mean, they had just disappeared, right? And he slips this paper across the table to me. And I looked down, and he had written the words, "What the hell happened to your Chinese?" And I felt so, So my first couple years working in the family, I felt very stupid.
Right, or like crippled, because you're I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah, it would take me forever to craft an email. I couldn't form complete sentences in Chinese, and I felt really frustrated because I felt like I am not this stupid. I'm just stupid in my mother tongue, which made me feel even worse, right? And then I was talking to a friend who also, he's a few years older than I am, and he's also kind of involved in the family business. His Chinese is, like mine, right? When I first moved back, and I asked him how he dealt with it, and he gave me a great answer. He was like, just own it, right? Own your hybridity.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
I absolutely do that.
And
till this day, my mother will still tell me, like, please go improve your Chinese. And I'm like, I'm already like in my mid-30s, and I've taken so many Chinese classes.
Yeah.
I've had so many tutors, and I just can't get it down.
I know.
And I just tell people, I mean, I think when we speak, people know, and in the way we look, right? They're like, oh, are you ABC? Did you just come back from the States?
Right.
And I honestly just tell people, like, like, 不好意思, I'm so sorry. Like, is it okay if I just write to you in English?
Right.
And you are more than welcome to write to me in Chinese. Thanks to technology now, I can Google Translate.
Oh, wow.
That's how
yeah.
I do things.
I have never even thought of that.
Okay,
but
new
yeah.
trick for you.
Yeah, thank you. No. But I will say, actually, no, because I'm such a, like, I do also feel like because our upbringing in Taiwan, we're brought up to be guai, right? And
so you really wanted to
I
nail it.
did. And I have worked really hard, and I actually even started to write in Chinese. And then so I write like this, we have like an in-house magazine just for our staff, and I have a seasonal column. And what I would do is write it in English and then translate it, right, loosely, and then have my mom edit it. And then I was like, no, this is not good enough. I need to learn how to think in Chinese, because you think differently and you write differently, right? A lot of people, like, the kind of age-old question of bilinguals is like, are you the same person in in English/Chinese or whatever language you speak, right?
Right.
And I think I feel like my answer would be, I don't know what you would say to that, but I think you're a little bit different.
I think so.
Right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, because like language is culture, and there's certain ways that you might or might not respond to certain situations.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So anyway, we're talking about going back to kind of the anchor, right? So I think the anchor would always be writing, right? Trying to figure out, like, how to be okay with wherever I am on that spectrum of hybridity, right? And I think it shifts for us all the time. It still does for me today, right? Even though I feel like 9 years later, my Chinese is so much, like, it's much better. Still not perfect, but whatever, right?
Well, I mean, you did a recording in Chinese, right?
I did.
Yeah, and I listened to that.
Yes, I did. I had to prepare a lot for it.
You came a long way. You could do an interview in Chinese. That's really good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Pat yourself on the shoulder. Going back to writing as your, kind of like that's for you, like, very meditative, and it's your daily practice. What kind of routine do you do normally for your writing? Is it like a specific time of the day you do, or is it kind of like whenever you have a thought, you write? And I guess your traditional way of doing it is more pen and paper, right?
Yes.
You don't do like I'll take out my phone and put words down on.
I don't normally. I mean, if I'm in a pinch and that's all I have, then yes. But I am a pen and paper type of person.
So do you have like a stack of all your journals?
I do.
You've collected.
I do.
And saved over the years. And do you like go back to it sometimes?
Yeah,
and,
that's all good questions.
Like, it's like great archival stuff. Like you can, I'm like right now I'm just going, how you can write a book about some part of, the journaling over the years. Because that's in itself is an art form, right? And that in itself is also you. That's your life's work basically in those journals.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I write it for any purpose, honestly. I've been keeping a journal since I was 9. And, but for the last, I would say, since becoming a mother anyway, my daily practice is I wake up, I do a little yoga to kind of just I feel like yoga opens up my pores, right? And opens up my mind. And also like, that space when you've just woken up, but you haven't turned on any lights yet. There's something very kind of magical and liminal about that space. So I like to be in that space. And after a little yoga, then I sit down and write. And like I said, it's not, usually that the writing I do at that time is just very free. I'm just kind of writing to put down on paper, and I'm not trying to make sense of anything. I'm just putting it somewhere. And then I'm usually, writing more kind of organized pieces. And that's writing that I'll do like in the daytime, in the daylight, right? And since becoming a mother, like my writing style has become, or my working style has become very fragmented, just because that's how my time is. And in the beginning, it was really difficult because when I was in grad school, that's your only job is to write, right? I could write for entire days. And then, of course, I didn't, because you're young and you just want to go out and live, right? But now, now I'm really good at kind of finding those kind of slips of time, right, during the day to jot things down and then put them together. Yeah.
Right. I just out of curiosity, I want to ask, because when people talk about you know meditating or just like finding that downtime for yourself, and sometimes a lot of times people say journaling is a great way to do that. As someone who doesn't journal, I'm just curious, like, how do you, because when you said, the first thing you do was, when you wake up, you do a little yoga and then you just jot down your thoughts. How does that work? Like, do you just like sit down and then just whatever comes to mind, you just write down, like however you're feeling? Like,
Yeah. That's a really good question. So I have a little
because I'm like, can you just like teach us how to do this a little?
Yeah,
Because
yes.
I'll just sit down and I'll be like, I don't know what to write. Like, I can write down my tasks for the day, but
Yeah.
I don't think as a practice, for me at least, I don't know how to do that, like in terms of just like really journal. And I think the reason, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a little bit of the reason is like that vulnerability of like just being honest with how you feel, and then like putting those feelings down. You're basically putting your feelings down on paper.
Yeah. Vulnerability is a huge part of it. But so I have a trick for you. And you actually instinctually, without even knowing what this trick is, you kind of talked about it. So if you feel like, quote unquote, I don't know what to write, right? Start by what you have to do. Like, write down a list. What do you have to do today, right? Or start by, describing where you are, right? Like, I'm sitting at my desk. It's cold and rainy today, and that reminds me I need to go, put on some water for tea. And then things will start to come, right? The other trick I do, and I do this a lot with like workshops, is set a timer just for 10 minutes. 10 minutes is not a long time, okay? And what you do is just keep your pen moving. And even if that means
like drawing, like doodling.
Yes, and I do that too. Like, I'm a huge kind of believer in doodling, right? And if you don't know how to doodle, it's not about like being an artist, right? It's you just draw a spiral, right? And I know you practice yoga, right? Like, like when you're drawing the spiral, it really slows your breathing. And things start to percolate to the top, right? And then just go with it. No one's gonna see it, right? It's not for anybody. And honestly, there's so many entries I never read ever again, because its purpose has already been served, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. You just gave me another idea for a potential workshop we could do together.
Oh.
But that's a side conversation.
You're full of ideas.
I want to stay on top of our topic here. So I'm just going to bring us back to talking about homecoming and the challenges, and you did talk about those things, but I do want to touch point on working with your brother and your parents. You mentioned the language was something earlier. Was there anything else? And how, obviously communication is key in terms of giving each other space and understanding how to work with each other and all that fun stuff.
I know. And it's so, I feel like it's such a, it depends on the family, right? Definitely. So I will say that, so my dad has retired, and my brother's taken over, and I help my brother. My brother and I are really, really different in our styles. He's, like growing up, he was more science-minded. He was very logical, incredibly bright and sharp. Whereas I'm more kind of like, I don't know. I do yoga and I write.
You're creative. So it sounds like you guys complement each other, basically.
Yes, exactly. See, you know exactly where I'm going. And I have to say that since we've started working together, I feel the closest that I've ever felt to my brother, which it's
beautiful,
right? And as a parent, if one day my kids said that to me about working together, I feel like that's a great gift, right?
Yeah.
So whatever happens kind of in the material world with the business, it's been challenging times. Everyone knows we're in retail. It's been super challenging, but I feel like that is it's not irrelevant, but it's kind of secondary
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
and like you said about communication and relationships, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and obviously it's not without its challenges,
Of course.
you know? And I also will say that even though my parents are very, they're very open minded, I do think that they treat, sorry, mom and dad, but I think they do treat my brother differently than they treat me.
Well, they come from that generation,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
it's a little inevitable.
yeah,
And they're doing their best,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
Like they
yeah.
don't mean to, but they were conditioned and raised in a generation where
There's different
that's
expectations.
yeah, and that's what
Yeah,
they know, right? Or
yeah.
that's what is expected, so to speak. Gosh, I had all these other questions. That I was I was like thinking about these questions I wanted to ask. 9 years, so you know you don't regret coming back at all, right?
No, and this is we're gonna stay here. We're not leaving. This is not even COVID talk, right? Even before COVID, my husband and I we realized how freeing it was to finally know that we're home. And the exploration that we talked about earlier on, that can happen on a really deep level here, right here at home. And yeah, it's so interesting, the kind of moment that we both realized that this is where we want to put down roots was this moment of such like it was such there's such clarity, right? In that, and in a way, people always talk about being free because you don't have to be rooted to a place.
Yeah.
I feel the opposite. I actually feel like once we knew where our home was, that we were more free in some ways. Yeah.
My dad used to say that, like, always know where your roots are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So wise, right? I know these are things that, I think a lot about things that my parents have said to us, right, when we were growing up, that then I kind of remember now as an adult and it sounds different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always in hindsight.
Right? Our parents are wise.
Well, and you are wise to your kids, right? So I wanted to ask before we slowly wrap up this conversation, in terms of just really briefly, we talked about the business, which is textile and retail. Could you kind of talk a little bit about Taiwan, right, and that aspect of it, and you can also add in a little bit about the new line you're working on, and then I have my last question before we close off.
Yeah. So going back to kind of your first question about homecoming and how I grew up, right, like with this westward thinking point of view. I feel that that kind of ran parallel to Taiwan's own reawakening, right? Politically or or culturally.
Yep.
It's just a different time now, right? Not just Taiwan, but globally, and Asia, maybe more specifically. So I feel like it's a really exciting time to be in Taiwan, and the family business is, my dad started it. It is a Taiwanese brand, despite its French name.
And
yeah, exactly. And a part of my job is, so my mom also worked for the business for many years, and she's a collector, not by trade, but by passion. And that's kind of, I think that's where her talent is. So she started to collect children's textiles, handmade textiles, mostly by indigenous cultures in Taiwan, in Southwest China, and Southeast Asia. So she has a collection. It's not huge, about 2,000 articles of, children's hats, bibs, baby carriers, shoes, exactly. Yeah. Beautiful things that I help manage. And she has always, so we house this collection in our headquarters. And we always encourage our designers to go and spend time with the collection, right? I mean, art, textiles, and, collections, they need to be communicated with in order to be kind of stay alive. So we've actually recently just launched a new brand called Yuan, Yuan, and it's Yuan as in like 圆圆滚滚的圆. And it's all inspired by my mom's collection and all the different kind of symbols that moms used to and would embroider on their children's clothes, right? So for example, Sometimes they might embroider, we see flowers. That's a very common one. But like you might see like a spider, right? A spider is a motif that shows up a lot because spiders are kind of seen as really intelligent insects. Are they insects? Yeah. No, I'm only stopping because my son is like super into, different animal genome, whatever. Anyway, so they're super smart because they can spin webs, right? Or like the toad. Sometimes you'll see on children's clothes because toads and frogs can tell the future by their skin can tell you what the weather's going to be like, So we've kind of encouraged our designers to create this line of clothing for modern, right, children, but rooted in very like traditional sensibilities. Yeah.
That's awesome. So we can like find this online, right? We can,
yes.
shop online.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the original collections will still be part of. This is just a subsidiary line, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, what advice would you give to those listening to this episode right now who could really relate to this storyline? Yeah, what advice would you tell them if they were, they're listening, whether it's, they're kind of thinking like, should I move back? Or maybe it's like they did move back, but they're like really frustrated and really struggling, or we didn't even go into the whole we kind of did, but like those who are coming back, maybe they're single, or those who are coming back and they're bringing their spouses back, or their kids, it's a lot of decision making. It's a lot of choices. It's a lot of, like you said earlier, a lot of internal conflict as well. What advice would you give them? Or any sort of encouragement or ways that, helps them to stay grounded in this process, to not forget who they are in the process of making this choice.
I feel like you just gave the advice. That's really beautiful. I really don't know because I know this is disappointing to end this way, but like, because it's so different for everyone.
It is so
and
different.
I think you put it beautifully, right? I think only how you can be your truest self. And only what situation and what context will help you and your family thrive, right? So I really, I don't know.
Okay, how about this one?
Okay.
Any books that you would recommend to people who could read, that maybe was I was gonna say enlightenment, not enlightenment, but like was helpful for you, or maybe when you like when you come across certain things and you read certain books, sometimes you're like, oh, that really made sense. Or like, oh, that was really cool. Like, I never thought of it from that angle. Or, any books that you might recommend.
Yes. Okay. I'm a huge...
Besides journaling, of course.
Right. Yes. I'm a huge reader. I will just say, okay, how about I'll just recommend one book that I read most recently because it's just on the top of my mind, and it's not necessarily about this topic, but it's called The Book of Form and Emptiness, and it's by a writer named Ruth Ozeki.
Okay.
I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, I will include all these references and resources and links in the bottom of the episode so people can reach out or shop for your own products and read this book.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much, Jen.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening to Curito Connects. For more Connects content, collaborations, and discoveries set to inspire you on your own individual journey, please head to our website at www.curito.co. Until next time, stay inspired, and thank you for joining us at Curito Connects.